The second minister of the Church of Hingham, and the first to serve at the Old Ship Church, was John Norton, who served for 38 years from 1678 to 1716. His great-granddaughter was Abigail Adams, and as he assumed his ministerial role, as stated in Robert J. Wilson's The Benevolent Deity, the citizens of Hingham began to perceive their minister as a mediator of controversy, rather than the fomenter of same. Norton was rooted in Calvinist orthodoxy, the creed of the Puritans, as was Peter Hobart. However, he had some small but significant exceptions. Calvinism believes in the complete depravity of all, and that only God's elect will pass through the gates of heaven. Norton claimed that our case is bad, yet not desperate. He believed that if the elect are unknown, they could include all of us. Calvinism claims to present the true gospel from which no one can deviate. Norton believed in spiritual independence by saying, "None can command the conscience and heart but God. Man can reach to the outward man. They cannot command man's heart and will." Such positions prepared the congregation for Ebenezer Gay, who was to move his flock towards Arminianism, which believes that all have an opportunity for salvation, and all should follow their own interpretation of Scripture. Such tenets promote inclusiveness, which would be a common thread throughout the history of the Old Ship Church. Sadly, John Norton died in 1716 and was mourned by all in Hingham. On December 31st, 1717, by a unanimous vote of the town, the 21-year-old Ebenezer Gay was approved to become the pastor of the Church of Hingham. In New England towns, the people got something better than representative democracy. They had a direct vote in all major decisions, such as this. When someone was not satisfied with the will of the people, that person could appeal to the General Court in Boston. This is how Cohasset was able to secede from Hingham. The Cohasset villagers had struggled for 5 years against the majority rule of Hingham voters who did not want to lose the tax revenue coming from that side of town. By the time Ebenezer preached his first sermon, Cohasset became a precinct with the right to have its own church and school. It was not until 1770, when the town was incorporated, that Cohasset achieved its full independence from Hingham. Though Ebenezer was a young man, he possessed a gravitas that inspired deference. Perhaps some of that was owed to his extraordinary face. As described by the aforementioned Robert J. Wilson III, his head was rather large, his eyes were narrowish and coldly gray, but his most striking feature was an enormously wide mouth that was located nearly at the bottom of his face with very little chin beneath. With this unusual countenance, Gay could assume expressions that were frighteningly forbidding, or radiant with benevolence. Ebenezer insisted on clothing his sermons in a plain country dress, similar to Peter Hobart's style, so as not to separate himself from his parish. In his first published sermon, titled "Ministers are men of like passions with others," he noted the need for self-acquaintance for ministers. Ministers had the same vitiated, or spoiled, nature as all men. Therefore, they should respect their flocks as equals when it comes to shared weaknesses. This approach also retained the loyalty of his parish, and that loyalty would come in useful in the future. The good feeling between pastor and parishioners was made evident in the financial generosity of those parishioners. Ebenezer's annual wage was £110, which was barely enough to support himself and his wife, Jerusha Bradford Gay. But he received many monetary gifts and also received country pay, consisting of food, firewood, and just about everything else that Hingham produced. His expectations got to the point that he felt it necessary to make this rather autocratic note. "I call your attention to the salt march hay delivered to me. It is poor in quality and short in quantity, and I don't expect to have to speak of this a second time." Calling our attention again to the secession of the Cohasset parish, this is a good example of how the ruling class of Hingham, the oligarchy of which Gay was a member, managed inevitable change with a minimum of disruption. Despite the years-long effort to secure the independence of Cohasset, Ebenezer was held in high regard due to his dignitas, that quality that demands respect from both sides of a question. As a result, the constituent members of Cohasset elected Gay's close friend, Nehemiah Hobart, as their minister. Nehemiah wholeheartedly entered the theological orbit of Ebenezer Gay, and cooperation between the towns was all but assured. A present-day example of someone with dignitas might be actor Morgan Freeman. At the beginning of Gay's ministry, there are many sources of stressful change that risked the survival of Hingham's delicate social balance. There was rapid growth in population, a widening wealth gap that contributed to pauperization, which gave rise to problems of drunkenness and public unruliness. To correct behavior issues, the town voted to allow only 3 taverns, to impose a curfew, and to build a house for the employing of the poor and correcting the disorderly. Reluctantly, the town hired tithing men, who were a sort of morality police. The leaders thought their town was better and needed no such supervision, but agreed to the hirings nonetheless. The most common use of tithing men was in church, where they used a long stick with a bulb or feather on one end to interrupt anyone trying to sleep during the service or get restless. The power in Hingham during the early 1700s was concentrated in the hands of 3 men: Colonel Samuel Thaxter of the Hingham Militia, Lieutenant Thomas Andrews, the town clerk, and Benjamin Lincoln, father of General Lincoln, the treasurer. When Lincoln and Andrews died, they did so within 4 days of each other and were replaced by their sons who had their same names. They took the same job, so no names had to be changed in the books. That triumvirate would soon be challenged by the powerful Cushing family from South Hingham. They owned vast acres of farmland and built many houses on Main Street and their homestead on East Street. They owned slaves, which was legal in the state from 1641 until the practice was abolished in the early 1780s. They ran the Cushing House Hotel and Tavern, which was where the post office is now. What they wanted, though, was power in the town, and the Cushings threatened to secede just like Cohasset. They reached a deal in which they got a new selectman and a new assessor who were chosen from their own. They also got what they wanted most, their own church, which was the Second Parish Church, formally dedicated in 1746. Ebenezer Gay was invited to be their minister, but he declined, and Reverend Daniel Shute was approved instead. Shute was a Harvard graduate and became a lifelong friend, ally, and theological disciple of Gay.